this first story, and this is something that I've been concerned about, especially as we started the primaries and as we're eventually going to get to the convention, which is going to be in July. Chances are, at least according to the DNC, a lot of Democratic leaders, that there's going to be a high chance for a brokered convention. That means there's going to probably be an uphill fight for delegates and which candidates are going to get them. So the chance for a contested Democratic convention has increased due to the fact of what happened in Iowa. And, of course, people are concerned on what's going to happen in New Hampshire. That's tomorrow. So we're going to find out how this is all going to play out. As it stands, this is an article from The Hill. They're talking about how Bloomberg is blanketing the airways with all of his money and ads. I'm seeing them all over YouTube. In fact, I even got a letter from Buttigieg asking the people who live in my house, hey, endorse me, support me for my run for president. Bloomberg, the Republican.
If you don't say, don't want to endorse you to this letter in the next 4 hours, you are automatically endorsing me.
Yes. And so right now, also the latest forecast, at least from 538, put the chances of no candidate winning a majority of delegates at 24%. No candidate reached a 30% mark in Iowa or dropped out after the caucus, which have traditionally narrowed the field. The centrist vote is deeply divided at the moment between Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, and Amy Klobuchar. So this is something we've talked about on the show, where the centrists are divided on which one they want to support. So it's a fight between Biden, Buttigieg, and Klobuchar. So that's an interesting case to point out. But now also this, too, and I just want to read this comment here, and then I want to open the floor, because there's some things that we got to address in regards towards a potential Democratic convention. So we shouldn't be surprised by this. Bloomberg's Ads Blitz has been effective, boosting him into double digits in national polls. I have not seen these polls in regards where Bloomberg is in the lead. He's the only candidate running a true national campaign with staff, offices, and resources spread across all of the Super Tuesday states and beyond. He can be in all 14 Super Tuesday states at the same time through TV and social, said Bob Mulholland, a Democratic National Committee member. No other candidate has that ability. Bernie Sanders. Really? So we're going to have this conversation. This goes on to something that we've said on the show. For tomorrow, especially for people who watch our show from New Hampshire, show up in mass and show up in force over there at the New Hampshire polls. Make your voices heard. Turn out to vote, because this convention will be a fight. Nothing's going to be easy. We already saw the disaster that happened in Iowa, and already it's just not only The Hill that's reporting this, but other outlets are reporting that there's talk about a brokered convention happening in Milwaukee. So here's how we combat that. Number one, show up to vote. Know the rules and regulations in your state's primaries so that you know the laws and what you can do to avoid a potential disaster that happened in Iowa. Now, each primary is going to be different. There's open primary states. There's closed primary states. There's caucus states. Remember, Nevada is also a caucus state. So this is something where people are going to have to mobilize, communicate, and effectively get their voices heard and turn out to vote. If you don't participate and vote, and if you also don't make sure there's election integrity, then there's a good chance there will be a brokered convention. Speaking of which, when it comes time to Milwaukee, everyone should be there. There should be 1 million plus people attending this convention. This is the convention in which, if the Democrats are really serious about this, they can select a candidate that could beat Donald Trump. And the only candidate that has the capacity to do this isn't Bloomberg and his billions of dollars. It's Senator Bernie Sanders. He has the political infrastructure and the coalition to do this. Paul, Daniel, I want to get your thoughts in regards towards this kind of talk about be prepared for a brokered convention. You know, I know we want to be positive about this, but let's just hear your thoughts.
So I'm actually, in a sense, I think that, again, I'm not sure how much we should be focusing on this. I think that, the ultimate way that we avoid a brokered convention is do what we can to turn out the vote and keep one from happening. So Bloomberg, I'm a lot less worried about him, I think, than other people on the set. He's going to be coming in late. There's going to be a lot of momentum. We've only had one state, and that was basically a shit show through and through. Let's be real. New Hampshire's happening. Nevada's happening. Those are states that Bernie is also poised to win. The popular vote matters a lot more. Again, going back to Iowa, that was a mess. So, Pete can get his extra 2 delegates. I care more that Sanders showed that he can get a lot more people to turn out. So New Hampshire, Sanders is ahead. Then it's Buttigieg. Then it's Klobuchar somehow. And then perhaps Warren. And then it looks like Biden might take 5th place. Again, my big focus right now is when are people leaving the race? and I want Biden out as soon as possible. And when Bloomberg comes in, he's going to be fighting with Mayor Pete directly. So I'd kind of like to see them go head to head and fight each other. It's going to make it easier for Sanders to take these votes. And then again, when does Warren make the choices that she makes? I don't know. We're going to see. But right now we have New Hampshire. New Hampshire is usually a well-run primary. Then we have another caucus in Nevada coming up that's isn't using the app, so let's see what happens.
Yeah, but
but Bernie Sanders has his app, which has worked, so I'm sure that they are going to not just be at 40% of all the caucus locations, probably more like 80%, where a lot of people are, because they're ready. We saw from Iowa that Bernie's team, the lawyers, their app, really did help in stopping shenanigans from happening. Shenanigans happened anyway, but Bernie still won the popular vote, which they were probably going to try and do something out. So anyway, they're thinking of calling it in, calling it out. But I think that right now, I really want to see what happens in New Hampshire. I want to see how it goes down. But we're expecting, by all indications, that Bernie's going to take this. And if he has a really committed showing, Pete takes second, Biden takes fifth. That's crazy. That's a really ideal situation.
Paul?
I want to point out that one of the things that's sort of required for the bigger army diplomacy thing to really win is that we need to win in overwhelming numbers. So we need people to come out and vote. We need people to make sure that they know that they're registered. It's the whole like it's not a Facebook campaign thing. It's you actually vote. But I also want to call out we need to be very aware of and exactly looking at how. Basically, actual democracy is being undermined, right? Point out that they're going with inaccurate results in Iowa. Point out that certain counties are double counted and others aren't counted at all. Point out all the coin flips and that ridiculousness. Like, we need to be vocal about, hey, like, if we have to win by overwhelmingly winning, that's super duper unfair, and I'm going to continue to make the case that that's super duper unfair, and we should not be giving default support to this organization that just cheats anyone who has progressive ideas every step of the way along the way. And that's my thing.
So I want to add this final statement in here, and it's actually from a super chat. Henry Volt 35, $5. Thank you for the super chat. New Hampshire is tomorrow. That's absolutely correct. Let's try and turn up the heat and beat the delegate count this time. I don't want another Iowa.
Yeah.
I think we all can agree. Now, here's what you got to do, especially if you know people in New Hampshire, especially if you know people who are Bernie Sanders supporters or Tulsi Gabbard supporters. Show up to vote. That is the key thing. If you don't participate, if you don't communicate, if you don't find a way to carpool or find a way to get to your polling station, figure it out now, because this is a time where your voice, your vote is going to matter. And if you don't use it, then be prepared for another Iowa situation. Now, do I think New Hampshire is going to be like Iowa? I will be legitimately surprised, but this is the DNC we're talking about. They're experts at screwing things up. Here's how we avoid it. We show up, because remember, the establishment and corporate media tried to control that narrative, and it failed because Bernie Sanders was ready. But the only reason why he was ready was because of his supporters and his campaign volunteers and everyone who was making sure that they were the ones at the end of the day to come out on top.
And so on that note, I think we should also remind that if you're part of the Sanders team and you got to be a poll watcher. I'm not exactly sure the roles that they're going to allocate to watch, but make sure if you're in a team and you're a volunteer, I think especially if you're out of state, I'm not exactly sure how they do it. That could be completely wrong. We need a lot of voter security. And sadly, Sanders is the only game in town that can be trusted with that duty. And they need as much evidence as they can to push and make sure that if there's any shenanigans, they can do something about it, just like they did in Iowa. Again, it's going to be easier. It's a primary. New Hampshire usually has a very good record of doing, a pretty decent primary.
But this is the DNC.
But caucuses, the natural complexity of the caucuses, the fact that you have to explain how a caucus works to people means that it's easier to finesse.
Yeah.
So this should be a little more direct. Hopefully, fingers crossed.